Scaling with People podcast. I'm Guinevere Curry, your host and founder and CEO of Guide to HR. And today we're going to talk about some lessons learned from an amazing founder, but also some key strategic insight into what you need to be thinking about from your financial perspective of growing your business. So today I have Jody Grunden with me. And Jody, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Guinevere. Thanks for having me on the show.
So tell us a little bit about who you are.
Who am I? Good question. So I am a founder that's made many, many mistakes over the past 20 some years.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, exactly. And I've learned from a lot of them. It took me longer than I thought to learn, from certain ones. But as we go through the day, I hope to share a lot of those mistakes with you and what we've done to actually, work through them. But I created a concept called Virtual CFO Services back about 20 some years ago. And the idea there was to help business owners scale their business, scale their business on a financial side, whether it's, with, creating, consistency within the way that delivery, creating different ideas and focuses, and really kind of keeping a business owner, helping them create a dynamic forecast that can help them lead the way. And the kind of cool part about it was my journey's been kind of weird over the years. I went from a fully brick and mortar team back in 2002 to a fully remote team in 2013. Had brought it from bootstrap with really no employees to having over 50 employees when I eventually sold it in 2022 to a larger accounting firm.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So now
Yeah.
I'm working with a larger accounting firm. We're in a hybrid type of environment where they're local and we're fully remote. And with that, it's been an experience, a challenge, eye openers, and we've finally gotten over the hump and looking forward to the next 3 or 4 years, growing it from now we're at about $12.5 million in revenue to hopefully 50 million as the target goal. And so that's a little bit about me, and looking forward to sharing as much as I can throughout this podcast.
Well, that's great. So you were talking about you had lots of lessons learned. What is one that you would say is a key one that if you could go back in time and tell your younger self not to do or to do instead or do better, what would that be? What would that look like?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Pricing appropriately.
Mhm.
We always thought from the very beginning, because keep in mind, when we created this concept, it's like building an airplane in the sky because there was nothing really like it before. And so with the virtual CFO concept, we're advising clients. So we're sitting alongside a client on a weekly meeting, helping them grow their business and really kind of guiding them through that concept. So we did some of the accounting stuff, the bookkeeping. We did that maybe a third of our clients, and tax stuff if they needed it. But the main reason it came to us was for that advisory. And so we always thought that it's just common sense. Everybody could do what we do. And then we found out pretty quickly that's not the case. That's why they're actually hiring us, because they need that third party insight. And so then the other thing we did was we thought people aren't going to pay for this. And so we started out really low, offering the service, and we were finding out that we weren't making any money. And we thought, well, we need to increase the price, but we're going to lose all of our clients. And so we increased the price. Nobody left. We still brought clients in left and right. And we're like, well, that's not what we expected. But we still weren't making money. And so this continued on, rinse and repeat. And I always told my wife, hey, next year's gonna be the year. We're going to make so much money. We're going to do so great. And then next year happened. It's like, we're still not making money. And because we always undervalued our service, it wasn't until we actually priced our service properly that clients loved the service. We were able to hire people that are really high quality people to actually do our job for us, so that we weren't victims of working in the business too much. And
Yeah.
and that's when everything really started snowballing for us in a great way. Growth picked up dramatically. We were growing 30% plus every year for probably for about 8-9 years, doubling our size every 3 years basically. And it's
Yeah.
all because we were pricing it properly. And it took us 10 years to figure it out, which is hilarious because that's what we advise people on. It took us 10 years for us to figure it out. So I know how difficult it is for business owners out there, unless you just luck into the pricing, but never
Yeah.
undervalue your service. People will pay for it if you're giving a high quality, a top-notch service. And that's something that it just took us a long time to figure out.
Yeah, that is so true. I talked to a salesperson who gave me wise advice. If you're getting too many clients, then
Yep.
you're undervaluing yourself. If you're not getting any clients, you're overpricing. If you can find that like sweet spot of enough clients, but at the right price, you're at it. So that's what I kept doing was like, oh, I learned very quickly. I was like you, I undervalued my
100%.
pricing for sure. I think that's the hard part, right? Because you don't want
Yeah.
to outprice yourself. You don't get clients, but then at the end of the day, you kind of need it to be right. Otherwise, you're not making the money. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Our bank actually told us that. It's kind of funny because I was talking to our banker at the time, and I'm like, yeah. I go, he goes, how's your business going? He goes, oh yeah, it's great. We I don't think I've ever lost a quote. People just love us. And he's like, you really think that's a good thing? And I was like, huh. So I did some research on it, and they said the average sale should close about 30%. You should have a 30% closing ratio. That is like, that's where you want to be. And it's like, I'm like 80, 90%. I'm like, wow. And so that's what we started doing. We started increasing our price until our closing ratio came down to that 30%. Once we were there,
Yeah.
we're there. And we
Yeah.
actually went to the other extreme where we're like, okay, now we're at 20%. So then next year we didn't increase it as much and it brought it back up to 30. It's amazing how that worked, but that's you're 100% right. That was our barometer, and it still is, on where we need to have our price in order to be effective in what we do.
And what a powerful statement of how metrics and reporting analytics are so key to the success of your business. Yeah. So you're obviously in finance.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you guys do? I mean, are you guys like fractional interim consulting? Like, is that basically what you offer?
Yeah, so we created the concept virtual CFO. You probably heard of it before. We created it back 20 plus years ago. And it's not in virtual CFO. There's a lot of different ways, or the base of that term has kind of got many different definitions to it. It is, some people it's just accounting, you're just doing bookkeeping or whatever. Some people are on the opposite side where it's just simply it's consulting, high end project based work, that sort of thing. The
Mhm.
way that we define it and created it, it's an ongoing process where we are actually your virtual CFO. We're actually in meetings once a week with you, helping you guide the ship through creating KPIs and forecasting, and really kind of helping a business run their business. And then
Yeah.
what happened was over time, it kind of morphed a little bit where because the clients we were looking at were, I'd say $2 million. Well, at that time it was probably $1 million ish clients. We were hoping to get, that's what we were
Really
hoping
small.
our audience were to be.
Start there and then help them build and get yourself fired,
Yeah. The problem
basically.
was they couldn't afford us and an accountant, bookkeeper, or whatever. And so we're like, okay, well, we
Right.
can do that. And so we start adding services to it to where a third of our client base, we're doing the bookkeeping also. So we're doing the CFO side, the high end stuff, as well as the accounting, bookkeeping, that sort of thing. 2/3 of our clients, they've got somebody in that place, and we just oversee the process, maybe tie the books out, making sure that they're good. So we're giving, great advice as we're going through. So that's
Mhm.
kind of that's what we do as that's our service offering, I guess.
Nice.
And the cool part about it is that we started out in Indiana, grew it to about 18 people. And in 2000, I think it was like 13, we went fully remote. So we got rid of the office and we started recruiting abroad, because I realized really quickly that the only way that we're going to grow is if we poach other accounting firms in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is only 300,000 people. How is
Yeah.
that? We're going to grow to a ceiling pretty easily. And I was like, I didn't want to grow
Yeah.
this. I wanted to grow to something really big. And thank God one of our clients was one of the first fully distributed companies in the world. I think they were one of the top first 25, and they had 65 people that worked for them. And it was like, wow, these guys have a really cool culture. They're doing everything really neat. They don't get any turnover. Everybody just loves working here. And I thought, well, heck, I could probably do this. And so within the first 2 years of the engagement, I'm like, oh, this would be really cool. And we, like I said, we're at 18 people, and I'm like, this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna pull the trigger, and we're gonna go fully remote. And accountants hate change. I mean, they just hate change. And so that's a significant change, right? And so
Yeah.
at all of our meetings, we had stand-up meetings, where we met in the conference room, we all stood up, so that how that stand-up meetings,
Yeah.
and we're like going through, and we always start with a joke. That's our joke is always the first thing, and then we do a fun fact thing. We kind of make it lighthearted. And I was so excited about this change that I was going to make, that I led right into it, and everybody's waiting for the punchline. It was like, and it was like you could hear a pin drop. It was like just dead silent. And they're like, "You're not really serious about this." And I'm like, "Yeah." I go, "We're virtual CFOs, right? We don't need to be at the client's office to do this. Why would we need to be here?" And they're like,
There.
"Well,
Yeah.
collaboration, blah blah blah, all the stuff they said everybody said
Yeah.
pre-COVID." I heard it and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And my partner, he's like, my business partner, he's like, "I can't do it. I got 4 kids at home. There's no way I could do this. I wish you had to talk to me first." It's like,
Oops.
I just assumed that you would think that was a good idea. The visionary that I am, thought that would be,
Yeah.
you guys all love this. And they didn't. And so I'm like, shoot. So I owned the building that we had the accounting firm in. So I told everybody, "Hey, well, I'm going to kick you out for 6 weeks. I'm going to remodel the entire building. We're not going to go remote. I'm going to make this really cool so you have a cool place to come and live, because you're living at work for the most part." And
Right.
they the construction took a little longer, spent like 100 grand. And one by one, they all came to me and said, "You know what? I kind of like this remote stuff. I'm going to make it. I'm going to try it and see if I can make it work." My business partner's like, "Hey, I knew I couldn't handle it. So I changed that front room. I put walls into it and I made it into an office. It works great." And I'm like, and so it was like one by one, all but 3 people, like, "I got to come to work." I was like, "Well, fine." And well, look,
This
I
is
never got
great.
the signage on the
Especially if
building.
it's not 100,000 to get everyone to recognize your
Yeah,
vision.
it's like, damn, I could have sent them to Hawaii.
Right? Yeah.
Blind them.
Yeah, exactly. That would have been so much nicer.
Yeah, it's so much funner. They have it.
Yeah. Oh my
Well, the
God.
funny part about it is that we never got into the office. No one ever came in the office. And so I then had to sublease it out. They didn't like the way it looked. So they gutted it again. So I had offices that had
Oh my
never had
gosh.
anybody in.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Brutal,
Oh
wasn't it?
man. Brutal.
Brutal.
Yeah,
But yeah,
totally.
it was
Yeah.
awesome though. And we actually developed a really strong team. The cool part about it was as soon as we went remote, Forbes wrote an article or interviewed me. Forbes interviewed me, and I didn't think it. How people reach out. You just don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, this is
Mm.
they're okay, great. They're interviewing me. Well, we in 19, I think it was 2000 and was 2015. They put an article in there of one of the first 125 remote companies in the world,
You
and I was like,
listed?
I was listed. Yeah.
That's so
So it was
awesome.
like Apple, Dell, Summit CPA Group, and it kept all these giant companies. And it was like little me, 18 people. And it was like, "Oh, this is cool." But the cool part about it was all of a sudden I was like, "Well, how am I gonna find remote people now?" And will people even know what that means?
To you.
And we got 2,500 resumes within, easily a day and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought I was getting spam, because I ran the marketing side, and I'm like,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it was my thing was like going off every second and a half. Another resume would pop in, and I'm like calling. I had a HubSpot guy, and I'm like calling him, "Hey, you got to turn this off." I go, "I'm not sure what's going on here. What, but my database is getting filled up, or my memory is getting filled up. All these resumes coming." He goes, "No, they're all original. They're not. You're not being spam." I'm like, "Well, how did all of a sudden people find me?" And we traced it back, and it was that article. They published that article, and instantaneously we got a ton of
Isn't that
resumes.
crazy?
Oh yeah, it was unreal. Then the issue is, how do
Wow.
you go through the resumes? It's like, do you
Yeah.
open them? Are they phishing? It's like, what do you do? But that's
Yeah.
really kind of helped us in growing. So we grew to 30 people within probably a year and a half. So I would have been out, we only grew the office to 30 people. That's how I built the office for, hey, we're going to expand to 30. Would have outgrown that office like in a year and a half
Yeah.
doing that. And it's like, oh my gosh. And then we grew to 50 people, grew up to $10 million in revenue. And then a CPA firm out of St. Louis purchased us. And so
Oh.
and so the idea is, hey, we're going to go from 10 million to 50 million, which is a cool thing. But the difference there is that we're fully remote. So I got like 75 people all across the United States, some in Canada, some in India, the Philippines, Mexico, and then all their people are in St. Louis. And so then that's another issue. So now you got a hybrid, so how does the hybrid work? Because we took over a small department there that had they probably had 18 people in the department. And so now we've got to figure out, well, how do you incorporate that without losing culture? Because their culture is great, our culture is great, but different. Both are different. And so then that's been our kind of our experiment over the last, I say our experiment, we merged 2 years ago. So that's been kind of our experiment over the last 2 years on how to really get these two cultures to gel. And we're finally there, which is really, really cool. And, with that, it was a big step back because we were on our growth trajectory. We doubled our size every 3 years because for a couple different reasons. One, we had a product that nobody had, that wasn't even, the term wasn't even being used. And people thought, wow, this is great. So we were doubling our size because of that. Plus our workforce was international or national for a lot of folks. And so we could hire the best anywhere, and which was great. And so our quality was great. The demand was great. So there's a lot of positive things there. And we had very little turnover, which was awesome because turnover will derail you, as a company. And then,
So true.
yeah, so that's kind of that's the story. And so we're to the point now where we took a big step back in the merger because it was two completely diverse, different organizations colliding with each other, trying to come up with the best solution. And now we're to the point where we're back to where we were hoping to be from the very beginning. So it was my ignorance, I guess, or I don't know what you call it. I just assumed that we continue to grow. Everybody would embrace what we had. And I completely forgot the resistance I got when I initially wanted to go remote. And you can imagine the resistance we got, not only the remote side, but they were doing the accounting bookkeeping side that I told you before that they called CFO services. We were on the high-end consulting side, and we only did their side by default. So it wasn't like we led by it, which they were so proud about. That was our default. And so it's completely a different, and we had to actually figure out how to combine those two and really make it solid. So that's my story. I know it's a long story, but that's where we went with it.
So that'd be really great. And I love your story because that's I kind of had a quicker trajectory of what you experienced. So I was coming in fractional HR. I'm like, I had no idea.
What is that? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, wasn't even sure. Like, I basically kind of fell into it. A lot of people I talk to are that are doing this now full time. They've been doing like side gig stuff for a while. I basically fell into it, and I'm like, what am I doing? What do I want to do here? And then, like, in the first 6 months, my husband and I were like, okay, I have 6 months to figure out if this is going to be something viable for me for a full-time gig kind of thing, right? And so, the first 6 months I had so much work, I had to bring people on. And then I created my company with the foundation of the value of doing what you love. And so the first person I brought on, it was one of my clients were like, yeah, we need a handbook or a review of the handbook or something like that. I'm like, ugh, because my background is actually actuarial mathematics and management engineering.
Oh, wow.
So I'm a weird HR person. I'm a math girl. I love math. And so I know I'm like, why didn't I get into finance? But I got out of college and got into compensation. And I was like, what is this HR thing? Oh, this is pretty cool. And that's how I grew into it. But so and they were like, yeah, we need that. And I'm like, oh God, I don't really want to do this, so I'm like, oh, I remember a really good friend. One time we were at lunch a while ago, and I asked her, like, HR's got like finance. There's so many different things you can do inside of it. I asked her if you could only do one thing for the rest of your career in HR, what would it be? And she goes, oh, handbooks and policies. And I was like, oh, like, where's the next, right? Like, that would be a very short life for me if I had to do that. And so then it dawned on me, I'm like, sorry, yeah, totally brutal. Like, dawned on me, I was like, hey, girl, do you want some quick money? Like, do you want a side hustle? Like, do you want to help me with this handbook? And she's been my longest person working with me over 2 years. So,
oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
And then, I now have about 7. Now, I don't have employees yet. I haven't pulled that trigger yet. But that's why I'm going to the expo. That's why I'm trying to, like, in my book, I'm trying to figure out how do I actually start building the business side so that I can do the employees, and I've really, this last 6 months have been really transformational for me because I've really recognized and realized that what I want to do now is work on the business, not in the business. And if I can do that well, then I can have employees and I can grow it and have a vision like you, like actually being able to do that. So that's where I'm 100%. Taking my company right now.
100%. Because I have not worked on client work in over 10 years.
And you probably don't miss it, right?
Oh, not at all. No, I enjoy doing what I'm doing. It's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoy
Yeah.
working on the business itself. It's
Yeah.
beyond it's why you become an entrepreneur, really. Uh
Yeah.
and that's that's where you're at. And so, the biggest thing that we did is I had to develop everything, had to have a process because I knew that I could go into a conversation without having any notes, without having any prep, and that
Mm-hmm.
client would come out thinking, wow, that dude is, wow, he understands
Mm-hmm.
me. Great. This is great. Can't wait to meet him. Can't wait to talk to him next week. I just made the assumption that everybody could do that. And
Yeah, no.
it's a bad assumption. And so I
Yeah.
had to develop processes
Yes.
for other people to follow in order to make me scalable because I couldn't
Yeah.
be the bottleneck. If I had 20 clients and I'm stuck there, then that's all the bigger I'm
You
going to get.
can't.
I'm still being a
Yeah, exactly. That's
or
kind of where
gig.
I'm at too, is
Yeah.
processes and templates and things like that. So I hired a very I wouldn't say junior, but she's probably 5-ish years into HR experience.
Mhm.
And so, I took a gamble, but her and I we came to a financial agreement, because of it, that I was going to have to work a little bit more with her to help support the client. Right. But
Yep.
it's been great because it also shows me where I need to add more support into my processes and to my
Mhm.
tools. So it's been a
Yeah.
good lesson learned, I guess, as we go along.
It's an awesome lesson learned, and it's really the only way you can scale. I mean, you have
Yeah,
to be able to have processes in place in order to scale, and
exactly.
that's a problem that a lot of especially in the accounting world where there's a lot of folks that they quit. They think, oh, this is an easy gig. I can do this, and then they got 3 clients and they can't get any further than that. They're like, well, how do you have time to pick clients up? How do you? It's like, well,
Yeah.
you got to have processes in place. You can't be you got to set the relationship up where you're not going to be that person. I mean, even when I
Yeah.
started out, Adam, my business partner, I gave him all the work. My job was to go
Oh,
and get business and do that,
yeah.
which was
Yeah.
genius at the time. Of course, I didn't think it was genius because I wasn't making any money, but it was genius at the time. I lived on credit cards for the first two
Fair.
years. I had no salary. It was brutal.
Yeah.
Giving him all that the work and building it up and that's where I needed to be from the very beginning. Whereas a lot of people fall in the trap where they become everything. They become the client's everything, and then it's super hard for that client to give that client off to somebody mentally
Yeah.
yourself. Although eventually you can do whatever, the clients aren't going to leave because you're off the case and you bring somebody great in. But you've got to be able to
Yeah.
teach that person how to be
I'd be
you.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
how to be you.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and how to
Yeah.
be
And
them in the same process.
yeah, exactly. And I think for me, it was just kind of a natural, like, I want to really stick to my values, and my values are do what I love. And I don't love this. So who can I pass it on to? And as I started doing that, I was like, oh, I'm making money when these people are working and I'm not working. This is great. I need to do more of this.
Yeah, you need to build
Right.
it to scale. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was like the fun part. I was like, okay, how do I rinse and repeat this? And that's kind of where it got, over. I'm unofficially about 3 years, well, a little bit more than 3 years. Officially
Okay.
in November it'll be 3 years. So
Oh, awesome. Awesome.
yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
still a baby.
Yeah, no. So
Well,
are
it's
you
fun.
making
I
pretty good
enjoy
money and
talking.
everything yet? Or are you still trying to figure that
The
out? Or
the first
it took
year
us
I
about
did.
10 years to make money. It was a long time. We're slow learners.
Yeah, no, the first year I did because I was working it,
Yeah,
right?
right,
And
right.
then
Yeah.
and then the last year and this year, like you, I'm not I am making money because I also have the problem right now that's keeping me from going like full throttle is I have a full client right now that I'm working on. And I don't they're in a place where I would never want to rock their boat. They're just in a really
Hmm.
there's two things kind of like happening back to back. And so once those two things are done, probably quarter 1 of next year, then I'll reevaluate where things are at and hopefully say
Hmm.
goodbye. And then I'll probably be on credit cards for a hot minute while I continue building up. But my goal's been like, how can I not be on credit? How can I start building up now
Hmm.
while working for them full time and have enough money to pay the bills? And
Hmm.
that way, like, if all else fails, at least the engine's warmed up. I'm hoping the train has left the station
Mhm.
before I leave them, right? But
Yep.
that's the goal. That's the goal. Yeah. So
How,
the book and the expo, those are two things like I'm like, well,
mhm.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah. How we did that is we brought a junior on every call. So
Mm,
when I'm meeting with this client that I've had for, in that case, I've had the client maybe for 5 years and strong relationship. It was the client I was
yeah.
telling you about that was fully remote and
Oh
everything.
yeah.
I brought in a junior in every single call. So that junior got to know the client really, really, really well. And eventually I started bowing out of the meetings and letting the junior take the lead and kind of seeing how that person did, how she did. And with that, she did really well. And so I'd pop back in the meeting and we're talking and everything. And then the transition was so smooth because
Yeah.
they already knew everything about this client, your big client you're talking about. They already knew everything about them. They're helping them with different things that I wasn't even involved in because they're in the meetings, and I'm always directing traffic towards her. And
Exactly.
that was huge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how I got off my big client like that. But that's how we
Yeah.
did it originally with all of them. So I was just me and this other person, or Adam and another person, or it was Adam and I initially, and so that's how we actually were able to scale and
Yeah.
kind of teach that junior that had never done this before how to talk to clients, because that's their biggest fear. They have no clue. They think, oh my God, I've got to come with a silver bullet all this time. And it's like, no, you don't. You just have to talk, listen, hear what they're saying. You have to have high emotional intelligence, and that's the key to it. If your EQI is everything when it comes to consulting.
Hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that's ultimately what they're paying for, right? Is that,
Mhm.
and I think too, coming out of it, it's also you're able to kind of look into the business and see some trends and see some things because you're not in it. You're just able to kind of go, okay,
Exactly.
what's going on down there, right?
Exactly.
And you're, and I also think what was one of my favorite things was working with one CEO. We actually were able to have a double date, and he told my husband, your wife said to me the first week we started working together, and I'm like, oh crap, where's this going,
Yeah.
And I'm like kind of sitting there going, oh, what's gonna and he goes, she said no to me, and I'm like, yeah, and here we are like weeks later still working with each other. So like I think that there's a little bit more of an empowerment because we're not in the business.
100% agree.
You're
Yep.
hiring us for our expertise and knowledge, subject matter expert. I'm going to tell you no. It's your decision whether or not to listen or pay attention, right? But
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be a yes person for you. That's not
Yep.
what you're hired me for.
Mhm.
So I love that empowerment too of the
Oh, you
role.
hit that right on the head. That's huge. Yeah, that's a life lesson for sure. I mean, they want you to be objective. That's why
Yeah.
that's why they're
I
not
mean,
that's why they're
that
not
is
hiring
really the
internally.
yeah, it's the best thing you could do for a CEO is
Mhm.
get into those awkward, tough, I wouldn't say it doesn't they don't have to be heated, but like maybe tense, right? Because you're contradicting what someone else is saying, but like
Mhm.
giving a different point of view, a different perspective, that
Mhm.
is the best thing you can do for a CEO, a founder, because
Yeah.
sometimes you're just all of us, no matter where we are in our life, you just get into the grunt of like what you're working on and you forget to stop and look up and go, am I even in the same
Yeah.
direction? Like, you think about how when they built the tunnel between France and England, like, right? It was like, you got to make sure that you actually connect at some point,
Yeah,
right?
and you're not going over
And,
top of each other.
right? All of a sudden you're like, wait, this is America. How do we get over here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I mean, you,
Yeah.
you just basically pointed your differentiation between hiring internally versus you. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm willing to tell you no.
Yeah.
I'm willing to
Exactly. Should
disagree.
have my slogan.
Yeah, I mean, really, that is your differentiation. I mean,
Yeah.
that alone, because as an employee, they want their job, you know,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and they've developed that personal relationship, and they can't say no a lot
Hmm.
if they're just a doer. Whereas you're going to sit
Yeah.
and say, "Hey, I just don't think this is the right way of going about it." Your choice, but here's why I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, yeah. We should probably talk about some finance stuff. And so you guys obviously are targeting like the startup, small size companies, is kind of like your
Our our client
ICPs.
our client base is typically $2 million or above. So it used to be really anybody, and as we've gotten bigger, and as we've gotten more specialized, and as we've hired more expensive people, uh, the uh, the 2 million and below, they can't afford us.
Yeah.
Because our average client, we'll charge about $90,000 a year for a client. per
Yeah.
client. Some of them go as high as, a couple 100,000. Some will be, 30 or 40,000, depending upon size, because we price based on size. So it's
Yeah.
typically, I would say 20 people ish is about a $2 million client. And then
Hmm.
it could go as high, our biggest client's 100 million, but we don't have many of those, and we don't
Yeah.
go after those. That was a client
Yeah.
that started at 10 million and within 5 years grew to 100 million. I
Oh,
wish I
that's
could say it was
awesome for
all
them.
because of us, but it wasn't. They lend some big. We helped them
Well, but you're
navigate
a
through
part of
that. Yeah, we helped them
it.
navigate through it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was that's pretty exciting when you see a client do that. But so
Yeah.
our big thing is that, and our on the finance side, we really focus on what we call profit focused accounting. It's a term I coined probably in probably 2004ish, somewhere in that ballpark. And what it was designed to help our CPAs learn how to provide CFO stuff. Because they, like I
Mm.
said, I was super good at what I did. I just did it naturally. My partner, super good at what he did. He did it naturally. The
Yeah.
next person wasn't super good. They were
Yeah.
super smart, but they had no clue what to talk about. And so we based it on four metrics. And the first one was cash metric, then it was a production metric, then financial metric, and then pipeline metric. So those are the four that we focus with every client. And with that, the cash metric, we say, hey, a typical business owner needs to have between 10 to 30% of their revenue in the bank. And so if they're a $300,000 a year client or company, they need to have $30,000 to $90,000 in the bank at all times, and
Yeah.
that's got to be liquid funds available so that they can make mistakes. So because there's a lot of mistakes when you're an entrepreneur, so they can
Yes.
hire the person that they couldn't afford and they shouldn't be hiring. Because now they can take more risk, and because they've got more
Yeah.
cash in the bank. And so we really focus on that, and we really focus also with clients and tell them, hey, you need a line of credit when you don't when your business is doing well, not when your business
Mm.
isn't doing well. And so you need to get that line of
Yeah.
credit in place. You hopefully never use it, but always have it at that still at 10 to 30%. Yeah,
Yeah.
that risk thing. And the 10% is 2 months of expenses. You probably heard that. And 30% is 6 months of expenses. And so the Dave Ramsey's of the world that say, hey, I need 6 months of personal stuff. That's true in business as well. And as a
Hmm.
business owner, if you are a low risk tolerance, then you need to have closer to that 6 months of expenses sitting there. Now, it just doesn't mean sitting there and making no money. We always say keep two payrolls in the bank at all time. The rest of it slide into a high interest savings account. Maybe it's a American Express or an Ally or a SoFi bank where you're making 4% interest on it, not 0.4%, but 4% interest on it. Or it's a CD where you can ladder it a little bit, and so you're making interest there. We can easily get it out even if there's a penalty, but you don't want to put it into like the stock market where that could disappear tomorrow, or you don't want
Yeah.
to put it into bonds where you can't get it out with high penalty. So you want to have it in something that is easily accessed, money market accounting. And then and then over there, then you can make those really informed decisions. And so the first thing that our CFOs concentrate on is making sure that, hey, we've got that established so that we are a solid company. And our average client has about 17% of their revenue in the bank. And so we've grown that. They didn't start that way. We've grown it so that, hey, this is what we think that they should have. And they've in the second metric has helped us get there. And that's the production metric. And what that's breaking down the non-financial indicators and really kind of helping a client figure out, here's how you actually drive revenue. So the production metric is focused on revenue. And so it's one of those things when we put together a forecast, we don't, and a forecast is very dynamic. A budget is very static. And so a lot of people put budgets together at the beginning of the year, and then they compare themselves the whole year to that budget. We create forecasts because forecasts are always looking out 12 months. And so you're
Mm.
always looking at the next 12 months. You really could care less what happened in the last 3 months. But what the last 3 months is going to tell you how to adjust that forecast and what you're doing right. And so we build a forecast based on the non-financials, like on a service-based company, might be full-time equivalents. It might be utilization rate, how utilized is your team working on clients? What's your average bill rate? not what you're charging a client, but what you're actually realizing per client, and then kind of breaking that out and figure out what the effective rate is and these different rates, so you can build your revenue. And keeping in mind your revenue isn't hey, we're built for $100,000 or $1 million and spread that out equally. Every month you're going to have different values for that, because every month has different days in it, has different holidays in it, that sort of thing. And so your November, you might have
The
a low
working
utilization.
days.
Yeah, you might have a low utilization in November, and so maybe you're going to get, that $1 million company, maybe they're only going to do 60,000 in November, and then when you get to November and you do 70,000, you're like high fiving. If you had done it the other way, you'd have been like, oh my gosh, what's going wrong? Well, what's going wrong is you're not built to have a $100,000 November, and so what that
That
does,
makes so much sense.
yeah, so it breaks it down, helps the client figure out how they can control things. If it's a trucking company, it's how many trucks you need to come in. Are you repairing the trucks, like a truck repair? How many repairs are coming in? How many do you have sitting ready to be to go in to be repaired? What's the average truck repair? Is it $100,000? Is it 60,000? Whatever that might be. Those are the things that a business owner can influence, and so that's the key factor there when you get to the production metrics, is things that a business owner has control over. They have control over people. They have control over, trucks coming in, for instance, or baseball teams, if it's whatever. And so that's the key. That's the second metric, is really kind of developing that forecast based on profit focused accounting, the non-financial indicators. And then the financial metric is the third one, and that's kind of looking at the rest of the finances and breaking it out between marketing and admin and facility costs, and knowing what each of them should be based on the industry, based on what a service-based company might do, and so that then you're being realistic on what you're actually planning. But again, it's not taking numbers and dividing equally. It's figuring out, hey, we've got a conference coming up that we're speaking at in and let's say it's March, and that's going to cost us $50,000 to be part of that conference. So here's the $50,000 I'm allocating in March for that. Here's when my insurance is going to be hitting. Here's when all my people, my production people are up in the production side. But let's go with all the people that are marketing or admin or whatever. Here's when their costs are getting hit with their all their burden costs, their insurance, their taxes, whatever that might be. And then
like people have bonuses or commissions that are quarterly or semi-annual, annual. Yeah.
You slide them in exactly when they come in. And so, month by month, what your net income is, your bottom line number is going to be. And what that helps an entrepreneur, an owner, is like, now I know how much money that I'm allocating out there. And let's say I want to have $100,000 salary, or 150,000 or 200,000, whatever that number might be, $500,000, I don't care. So you build that in there, and you say, okay, so here's what I'm going to pull out of the business. And then you can play the numbers game. I call it the penny game a lot of times. You have I have 100 pennies. How are we going to allocate those pennies? This is going to be, so much is going to go to the people that's doing it. So much is going to me. And you got to figure that out. And you're kind of playing around with those numbers. And so the idea there is, with the financial metrics, you're shoring things up based on what the industry is going to tell you is legit, and then what you want to get out of the business yourself. And so those are the financial metrics. And then the final metric is what we call pipeline metrics, and that could be for a restaurant, that could be the seasonality, how clients are coming in, not what you're billed for, but what's going to drive clients in. For a service-based company, it's how many leads you have, and what do you have under contract, and there's a lot of things that go into that. And so what the pipeline metric does, it takes the revenue, the production metrics, and it normalizes them. So it says, hey, over these next 3 months, we're built for $100,000. Our pipeline only shows that we have $80,000. I need to adjust it down so I can see how that impacts things, not only on the revenue side, but you flip it over on the cash side. It looks like, in November, we're going to be short now in cash because we had a bad March or whatever it might be, or November is solid. We can pay some credit cards off that we had out there, because now we've got a great, because now it changed everything dramatically. And so they all kind of tie in together. And so, as a business owner, that you got to really know all, you have to have control of all those: cash, production. You've got to have that forecast that's ever changing every single month. You've got to look at it on a consistent basis, not only when you can't look at it just when things are going bad. And that's when people typically do what happened, and it's like, well, that's kind of too late at that time. So you got to look at it as you're going through it so that you can say, hey, in March, like I said, November, we're looking 8 months out. November is going to be bad. What can we do now to impact November to improve it? And so that's the idea between what we talk about with profit focused accounting, is really getting the business owner understand that, and then meeting cadence is very consistent so that they can take that ball and run with it. Or, like we always talk about a map, a map, if you're in Indiana and you want to go to Florida, I used to live in Indiana. I live in Florida now. I don't need a map to go to Florida. All I'll do is just go south. Exactly. I'm gonna hit the ocean. I know that Florida is on the East Coast, so I'm gonna go south to hit the ocean. Then I'm gonna go east. I might go all the way around Florida before I get to Fort Lauderdale to get there, but I'm gonna get there, right? That's what a business owner does. They're just kind of going back and forth. When you have that forecast in play, now you've got the map that's showing you exactly how to get there, the quickest routes. Which not is not always the great thing. When you have a CFO helping you guide the ship, now you got the GPS system. Hey, we got roadblocks ahead. Here's how we go around the roadblocks. Here's how we go around the detour. It's a lot quicker. It might be shorter in mileage, but quicker here. Let's take this route quicker. That's the difference between all three. I can get to the same place, and business owners, we stumble there a lot of times. But when you have forecasts in place and you do it yourself, you can get there. Then you have someone like yourself, in the HR, it's going to help you get to that location quicker, because now you've got that person that's going to guide that ship for you.
Yeah. That was some great tidbits there. I love those 4 tools. And if our listeners are hearing anything, I hope that's what they hear, those 4 tools. Go back and re-listen, take your notes. I learned some great things right there. So that was awesome. Thank you so much, Jody. So Jody, I'm having so much fun talking with you. I've learned so much throughout this time here. But as we wrap it up, any last final thoughts or tips or words of wisdom you want to share with the audience today?
Yeah, going over. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. I would say that the tips would be, as I mentioned earlier, price appropriately. But I would say the biggest thing is that as an entrepreneur, really take the risk. I tell people all the time, risk taking is a big thing. It's got to be a solid risk that you're working through. But the story that I tell a lot is my father-in-law has this great idea to open up McDonald's, and with McDonald's, it was right on the corner. It was like a half a mile away from his house. He had all these plans on opening up. He was looking at the land. He's really doing a lot of the background research, and he was doing it for about 10 years. Ooh. Every time I heard about this, it was, hey, here's what we're going to do. And guess what? Finally, the McDonald's went up, which was great. The problem was it wasn't him. It was somebody else. And somebody else is making a lot of money at that location and doing extremely well. And it's because he did everything all the way up until pulling the trigger. And I guess that's, as an entrepreneur, that's what you have to do. You have to be able to pull that trigger. And that's what makes you so different and unique than an employee in an employee, because an employee will not pull that trigger. An entrepreneur will. And the key is you just have to look at those different opportunities out there and know which one you want to pull the trigger with.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's scary, but I think the key is trusting yourself and trusting that what you're working on, what your industry you're in. And that doesn't mean you know it all. And that doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes, but to really trust in your gut and your instincts and the knowledge you have built up over your experience and education and whatnot. So make that leap, and you might be the happiest person on the planet a couple years later because you did. So, Jody, this was a blast. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for the listeners, I hope I know I got several tidbits, but I hope you got at least one. And until next time, have a wonderful day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you next time.